It seems Meghan Markle has been moving swiftly from one platform to another, trying every possible outlet as quickly as she can. Yet no one appears to be inviting her back for a second round. The Cut interview, that business-styled podcast, no one seems eager to repeat the experience. Now she has arrived at Bloomberg, for reasons that remain unclear. Why? I cannot say. It does not appear to make much sense. The interview itself carried the title Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, on life and business beyond the royal spotlight. Although it mentioned both life and business, the presentation leaned heavily toward business. The interviewer, Emily, began the video by saying, "We are going to get to know Meghan, the businesswoman, because we have already heard of Meghan the divider, Meghan this, Meghan that. Now it is time to meet Meghan the businesswoman." It was, quite clearly, packaged as a business-centred interview. And yet, we know how such things usually unfold. Plenty of gloss, very little substance. This year alone, she has appeared in the Time 100 feature on the Aspire podcast, with Jamie Kern-Lima, in People magazine, in Bloomberg, and in Fast Company. All these interviews, all so eager to present her as a serious figure in commerce. But one cannot help feeling it is all a little premature. She is hardly a runaway success. Her products are not selling particularly well, nor are they reviewed with much praise. Her show struggles with poor ratings and weak performance. So one wonders, what exactly are we meant to hear from her on the subject of business? What is actually happening here? It all feels rather like jumping the gun. Are we here to discuss marketing missteps? Because while she does not acknowledge them, there is no shortage of poor examples she has already provided. This is someone who spent more than a year teasing the arrival of jam, talking about jam, joking that jam was her jam, only to unveil a spread. And what a spread it was. A thin, sauce-like liquid labelled as jam. Yet she continues to call it jam in her Instagram posts, as though repeating the word will somehow change its nature. But it is not jam. It has never been jam. Someone ought to tell Meghan it is most certainly not jam. One of the most basic rules in business is that a product's name, packaging, and marketing must prepare the customer for what they are about to receive. You set an expectation, and then you meet it, or, ideally, exceed it. If you fail to do so, you are failing at the very core of commerce. Before a customer even tastes the product, their expectations of flavour, texture, and consistency should already align with reality. Meghan's so-called spread, watery and unappealing, does not. And if she cannot get something that fundamental correct, then what hope is there for her to be taken seriously in a business interview? Before we turn to the interview itself, let me add this. I have said before that releasing multiple things on the same day is, generally speaking, a foolish idea. A clever approach would be to let an interview appear a week before or a week after a launch, not at the exact same moment. Launching products on the same day as a show can make sense, but only if the products have been properly teased in advance. Meghan did not do this. She failed to prepare the consumer to buy when the show was released. The only thing with any real date attached to it was the show itself. That was where the limited anticipation lay. Instead, she cluttered the news cycle, dropping the Bloomberg interview and announcing more products all on the same day. Why? My sense is that it was an attempt to drown out the negative reviews of With Love, Meghan. By flooding the news with other stories, she created some variety, so the headlines were not filled exclusively with bad reviews. A defensive move, perhaps, but strategically clumsy. In public relations, the smarter tactic is to pace the coverage, to stretch it across days or weeks, so that each piece of press earns its moment and generates attention. Done properly, this becomes a form of free advertising. But Meghan did not follow that logic. And for that reason, one suspects that behind the scenes, confidence in both the show and the products is beginning to falter. But let us begin by listening to this first clip.
I know I do. Mm-hmm. And if you know me, you know that I do. There really is a lot of value to when you anchor into your own knowing, then you're telling your own story. Yeah. You're telling your own story and how you show up in the world, what you do. You actually don't need to say anything. You can show who you are.
The opening question is about owning your own story, knowing it, without necessarily needing to speak it aloud. A curious sentiment coming from Meghan Markle, is it not? This is someone who has spent more than 5 years publicly recounting her story, working tirelessly to persuade the world of her narrative. And yet, what she says here does carry some truth. If you are genuine, if you are honest, you do not need to prove anything to anyone. You do not need to defend or explain yourself endlessly, because the truth stands on its own. That is a fair point. But it is not the way Meghan and Harry have lived, nor the example they have set. Perhaps she is projecting, perhaps she has noticed or has been told how people speak of Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Catherine comes across as authentic precisely because she does not spend her days explaining herself. She does not announce who she is or dictate how others should perceive her. She simply lives her life, quietly, and her values shine through in her choices and conduct. People recognise this, and they believe in her sincerity. Maybe Meghan imagines that adopting this language will help her in some way. Perhaps she hopes it will lend her the same air of authenticity, but whether she can achieve that is another matter entirely. Perhaps she is thinking, well, everyone believes Catherine, and Catherine never says anything, never explains herself. So maybe Meghan is now attempting to borrow that same approach, pretending that she is not explaining anything to anyone, claiming instead that she simply owns her story. She would like people to forget how much she has already said, time and again. That, of course, is one of the problems. She insists on telling us who she is, yet her actions and her history reveal something entirely different. I have even compiled a playlist of her past interviews, both print and video, each broken down and analysed. I will link that above and again at the end of this video for those who would like more examples of Meghan in her many versions. And that really is why the public struggles to see her as authentic. She is always defining herself, always telling us how she wishes to be perceived. At present, she wants to be the warm, gracious, successful businesswoman, bringing us gifts from her heart and her home. But in reality, it does not align. It does not match the Meghan of the past, nor does it match the reality of the present. And then, astonishingly, so early in the interview, they returned once again to the dish soap story, her 11-year-old self writing letters. Can you believe it? I was genuinely surprised that anyone would still choose to highlight this. Shocked, in fact, that Bloomberg thought it worth including. For the record, those so-called dish soap letters were not unique to Meghan. They were part of a standard school assignment given to many children across the United States that year. The only difference was that Meghan's father had connections in television which allowed her class to be featured on camera. That was the exception, not the rule. As for Meghan's telling of the story, her tone is as self-important as ever. I shall spare you the clips of this particular moment, but suffice it to say, it sounded just as pompous as one might expect.
Trying to be relatable while also being a duchess.
No, I don't find, I'm just being myself. So I think probably it was different.
Next, Meghan does a really bad job of answering this question about being a duchess and whether or not that kind of gets in the way of being relatable. I will try to insert a clip here, but if it gets copyright flagged or something like that, I will have to cut it out. So please forgive me if it disappears off the video.
Several years ago, where I couldn't be as vocal and I had to wear nude pantyhose all the time. Let's be honest, that was not very myself. I hadn't seen pantyhose since movies in the 80s.
She handles this part of the interview dreadfully. She essentially claims that wearing pantyhose while part of the royal family felt inauthentic to her, yet insists that being a duchess has no effect on her relatability. And that, frankly, is a terrible way to answer. It ignores the obvious catch-22. Pretending there is no conflict is not only foolish, it comes across as manipulative and disingenuous. The truth is that of course there is a conflict. Of course it is difficult to be both relatable and a duchess, particularly when you are so eager to use the title at every possible opportunity. Even without the duchess title, Meghan's lifestyle is privileged. She lives in extraordinary comfort. And that is not unique to her. Celebrities across the board are struggling with the same problem in the age of social media. People can now see, with startling clarity, just how privileged celebrity life is. The wealth, the enormous homes, the staff who keep them spotless, the personal trainers, the chefs, the endless resources that make their lives run smoothly. Yet those same celebrities often post carefully curated snippets on social media, trying desperately to appear relatable. It does not work. Audiences are far more aware now of the gap between image and reality. Culturally, this awareness has grown, and the conversation has turned to mental health, reminding people that what they see online is edited, staged, and perfected, supported by an invisible network of help. Celebrities are not staying fit and radiant because of some effortless lifestyle. They have teams, money, and access to resources most people cannot imagine. So when Meghan insists there is no contradiction between being a duchess and being relatable, she ignores not only her own reality, but the wider cultural truth. And that, more than anything, is why her answer rings so hollow. And that, really, is at the heart of the issue with Meghan Markle. Even without the title now largely symbolic, given that she is no longer a working royal and does not even reside in the United Kingdom, it is her lifestyle itself that makes her difficult to relate to. To go about using the Duchess of Sussex title while simultaneously pretending that it does not hinder her relatability is, quite simply, foolish. She does live a very privileged life, and denying that only makes her seem less genuine. There was, in fact, a better way she could have approached the question. She might have said that because she married into the title rather than being born into it, she never felt it truly defined her. She could have explained that while her circumstances changed, she herself remained the same. That would have sounded more reasonable, more grounded. Instead, she chose to pretend that the title has no effect on relatability at all. A manipulative and contrived response, one that does not ring true. And then there is her comment about pantyhose feeling inauthentic. Honestly, it is one of the weakest answers she could have given. Pantyhose or tights serve a purpose. They create a smooth line beneath
They help you
clothing,
create a
disguise
really
panty
smooth
lines,
line.
and,
They will
if one
blend
opts for
over
tummy
and
control
hide
versions,
panty
they gently
lines.
shape the
They,
midsection
if you
to
buy
create
tummy
a
control
polished
ones,
finish.
they help smooth
Even
over
the
your.
slimmest figures benefit from the effect. Pantyhose can smooth over areas like the belly button that would otherwise disrupt the lines of a dress. We saw countless instances where Meghan's choice to forgo them left her outfits looking untidy. Visible panty lines, the outline of her navel beneath thin fabric, silhouettes that broke the elegance of the garments and made them appear less refined. A pair of simple tights could have elevated those looks, providing the clean, polished effect expected of someone in her position. Far from being inauthentic, they are, in fact, an easy and practical tool for elegance. And then there is the matter of nylons. Why be so adamantly opposed to them in a professional setting? It is, at the very least, questionable when it comes to etiquette. But let us set that aside for the moment. When the discussion turned to the criticisms of her show, Meghan's response was telling. She insisted that she knew exactly who she was speaking to. She had, in her words, found her audience. According to her, that audience and her partners at Netflix absolutely loved the programme. I will play a clip of that exchange for you here.
I think I knew who I was trying to meet. And so if you know your audience, you know your demographic, well, they love the show. And my partners love the show, and that's why we have a season 2.
I do not think even Meghan believes what she is saying. Anyone can see from the ratings and the reviews that the majority of people disliked the show. That is simply a fact unfortunate for her, no doubt, but a fact nonetheless. And of course, that must sting. But there was a way to handle it with grace. She could have leaned into her passion, saying that she truly believed in the project and was determined to improve. She might have expressed hope that people would still find something meaningful in the show, or that it would resonate with those who share her interests. Even a simple acknowledgement of the criticism, paired with a willingness to learn and grow, would have sounded far more human. Instead, she dismissed it all. Her answer boiled down to, "The people who liked the show are the only ones who matter. Everyone else is wrong, just critics trying to make a living." That attitude does not project confidence, it projects denial, and it robs her of an opportunity to show sincerity, humility, and resilience. When the interviewer raised the question of whether she was glorifying the so-called tradwife lifestyle, I found it a rather odd angle. That discourse already felt passé, though perhaps it still lingers online. To me, it seemed a little forced. Meghan, however, sidestepped the question, which struck me as an odd choice. She could simply have acknowledged that the whole tradwife idea is an internet fad, and said something like, "That does not really apply to my show." That would have been simple and effective. To be fair, though, the way she did answer was not terrible. She said there was no judgment on those who choose that life, but that there is an in-between. On that point, I actually agree with her. Online culture loves to slap blunt labels onto everything too quickly, too harshly, with no nuance at all. Real life does not fit neatly into those internet categories. For example, I personally would far rather be a stay-at-home mother spending my days cooking, cleaning, baking, caring for my children and pets, tending to my home and family. That would be my preference over outside work, and yet I would not call that being a tradwife, nor do I think the label adds anything meaningful. It is just another internet identity that strips away the complexity of real life. So, in truth, I think it was a rather silly question to put to Meghan, but this was, ironically, her opportunity. Meghan loves to emphasise how hard she works. She could easily have said, "Well, I am spending my time creating this show while raising young children." That is hardly the picture of a trad wife, it is work. That would have been a strong, sensible response. Instead, she danced around it. And while she insists she is deeply involved, we all know she has considerable help. Still, if she had leaned into the work angle, the point would have been clear. Someone producing and starring in a Netflix show is not, by definition, living a so-called trad wife life. And then she could have moved on. And now we come to as ever. Meghan, unsurprisingly, refused to share exact sales figures. That makes sense. If she admitted to being a microbatcher, her carefully curated, sold-out image would collapse. Still, she did let slip that she went from a few thousand units to 1,000,000 units, which in itself is revealing. It confirms what we suspected. Those early launches were indeed microdrops. But let us remember the context. Those first batches of products were not purchased by an enthusiastic mass market. They were skewed heavily by the press publications, independent journalists, and commentators all wanted to get their hands on the products to review them. That created an artificial spike, a one-off surge that does not reflect true customer demand. To project large-scale success from such beginnings is a huge mistake. The reality is that the customer base was far smaller than those early figures suggested, which explains why the products are now struggling to move. When asked about her pricing strategy, Meghan claimed that she wanted the products to feel attainable. She cited her so-called hero product, the jam, at $9. The way she spoke, you might have thought she was unveiling some world-changing breakthrough rather than a jar of fruit spread. In truth, for half that price, you can buy a far better jam in any supermarket jam with the proper texture, not a thin, runny concoction. And you do not need to pay shipping. The contrast is glaring. And that, really, is the crux of the problem with Meghan's products. They are overpriced. Add shipping costs and the inconvenience of ordering online, and then consider that the taste is underwhelming very quickly, it simply ceases to be worth it for the consumer. Emily asked Meghan what she ultimately envisions as ever becoming as a brand. Her answer was ambitious. She wants it on retail shelves, available in shops worldwide. She spoke of this goal with great confidence. Yet the messy start of this business, the direct-to-consumer model, the chaos surrounding With Love, Meghan, and the already dwindling interest suggests she may have lost momentum long before that dream could materialise. Launching with at least one brick-and-mortar access point, something tangible for people to experience in person, would almost certainly have been a wiser approach. When asked about rebranding, whether With Love Meghan was in fact a rebrand, she flatly denied it. No, she said, this is who I have always been, but of course we know better. Her public persona has shifted countless times over the years. To claim otherwise strains credibility. And then, curiously, she pointed to her presence on Instagram as a kind of marker of authenticity, as though simply being online, posting curated glimpses of her life, proved anything at all. It was a weak answer, and one that only highlighted the ongoing gap between image and reality. And I really wish one of these interviewers would ask her point blank, how do you reconcile being on Instagram, owned by Meta, with your stance against Meta ending their fact-checking initiatives? She and Harry put out a pointed letter condemning Meta for removing fact-checking from their platforms. They spoke strongly against that decision. They have also claimed to hold a firm stance against social media policies that allow harm to children, online bullying, exploitation, and so on. They like to present themselves as supporters of a safer online world for children. So how does Meghan reconcile those two conflicting positions? How does that sit with her? Because, quite frankly, it looks deeply hypocritical. It suggests she does not actually care about those online safety initiatives, since she is using Instagram to sell products, thereby making money for herself and for Meta in the process. Where are her principles in this dynamic? Where are her ethics? Either she does not truly care enough about online bullying and the broader harms of social media, or she is willing to sacrifice those supposed principles for profit. Either way, it raises very uncomfortable questions. I often find myself wishing that someone would ask her to explain things in a way that truly makes sense. When she is questioned about criticism from the press and from people online, she tends to step back from the popular narratives. She says that what people attack is not her at all, but rather a caricature of her. According to her, it is not the real-life Meghan who is being criticised, but instead this version created and repeated by the media. In her telling, the so-called media Meghan is the one people dislike, not Meghan herself. That point of view does carry a touch of self-importance. Yet, to be fair, there is some truth to it. Every public figure is subject to the same distance. We do not truly know them as individuals. We only know what they choose to share with the world. It is their words, their actions, their appearances that people use to form judgments of character. In the case of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, they have chosen to reveal themselves often, speaking directly to cameras, granting interviews. and appearing in widely watched conversations such as the one with Oprah Winfrey. It is from these moments, straight from their own mouths, that many people draw their opinions, not merely from rumours or tabloid gossip. So, while it is fair to say that the media can exaggerate, distort, or run away with an image that is not quite the same as the reality of a person, it is also true that much of the public response comes from what Meghan herself has said and done. Somewhere between the narrative crafted by the press and the picture she presents lies the version of her that the world is judging. It would be such a relief, almost a breath of fresh air, if she would simply acknowledge her own part in the story. To hear her say that she has spoken unkindly about others, that she understands why people feel the way they do, or even that she has lied or made mistakes, just that admission alone would change everything. Imagine her saying, "I have made many mistakes and my public image has suffered for it. I am trying to repair that. I am trying to make amends." Instead, every single criticism seems to be batted away, flipped around, and pushed back onto others. Each time, the message becomes, "No, you are the one with the problem." This constant deflection is not only frustrating, it is a well-recognised sign of narcissism. It is a pattern many people know. You tell a narcissistic person that you are tired of them always arriving late to dinner, and rather than acknowledge it, they push the blame back on you. They will say, "You never choose a convenient time for me. You know I am busy. Why do you not make it later?" The fault is never theirs, always yours. Meghan herself is not in that example, but her way of handling criticism mirrors it. She insists that disapproval is not rooted in her words or actions, but in some fabricated caricature invented by the press. Yet when one looks closely, the criticisms stem from her own choices, things she has said and done publicly. In South Africa, in the interview with Oprah Winfrey, in the Netflix series, in her podcast, in countless appearances, people have watched her behaviour, sometimes bossy or dismissive toward Prince Harry, at other times drawing comparisons with Princess Diana in ways that felt contrived. There have been moments of untruth, of contradictions, of claims that did not hold up. These were not imposed upon her by others. They were her own words, her own actions. That is what people are reacting to. Still, she seems unable or unwilling to see it. Instead of reflecting, she reframes the story. She says that criticism of her work, even of her podcast, is not genuine but motivated by profit. According to her, negative reviews exist only because being critical brings in revenue. In her telling, the reviewers do not actually dislike her show at all. They secretly enjoy it, perhaps even cooking along with her recipes at home. Such reasoning feels far-fetched, almost absurd. Yet it is part of the same pattern, twisting, reframing, and reshaping the narrative so that the problem always lies elsewhere, never with her. For the record, I certainly did not think that pasta looked appealing.
Negative voices, are they saying negative things and then secretly going home and making single skillet spaghetti? Possibly.
But setting aside the humour, dismissing the negative reviews as if they were only driven by hidden agendas, diminishes the genuine voices of criticism. It shelters her ego while bending the story into something easier to accept. A casual viewer might even think, well, perhaps she has a point. Maybe people are only writing these things for attention or profit. Yet the truth is far less flattering. On platforms such as Rotten Tomatoes, where a wide range of professional and neutral reviewers gather, the verdict was the same. The show was not good. That is not a matter of spite, but simply a matter of fact. Still, this explanation offers her ego a way out. It allows the narrative they only said these things because they were incentivized. They do not really think my show was poor. In reality, the consensus tells another story. The shows, and even the recipes, failed to resonate with audiences. They did not connect. They were not well received. So no, it was never about profit, nor about a sinister media plot to chase clicks with negativity. The criticism came because of the work itself. Her show, her ideas, her choices, her words, those are what brought the judgment upon her, and no amount of twisting the narrative can undo that. What strikes me most is how little the hypocrisy seems to register with her. She openly criticised her in-laws on national television and did so with claims that many considered untrue. How can she not recognise the weight of what she has done since the year 2019? It is astonishing, truly. And yet, in this most recent interview, an interview supposedly framed around business, the conversation drifted far away from its stated purpose. Instead of speaking about ventures, strategy, or leadership, the questions wandered into whether she uses artificial intelligence, her thoughts on social media, whether she feels pressure to be perfect, even whether she can go incognito in Montecito. How did we arrive here? The interviewer, Emily, introduced her as the businesswoman, yet hardly any questions had to do with business at all. That is the pattern every time. When Meghan is presented as a businesswoman, the discussion rarely touches business, because she is not, in any real sense, a business figure. At the very end, she was asked the classic closing question, what is one thing she wishes people could know about her? She paused for a long while, then gave the same answer she has given before, that she is a real person.
One thing. Oh gosh, what's the one thing? Oh gosh, I think when I sit with it for a second here, I just want people to know that I'm a real person.
It could have been an opportunity to show growth. She might have said, I am real, and I have made mistakes, but I am learning, I am making amends. That would have been honest, even disarming. Instead, she went on about school pickup, about facing other parents who have read things about her in the press, about her friends encountering the same. I am a real lady, she seemed to insist, as though repeating that phrase might itself answer the doubts. But the moment slipped away, and what could have been meaningful became once again a carefully managed and ultimately hollow refrain.
No, my friends have to read those things. Like, I have real best friends, the same ones since I was 17. I'm a real mom.
So rather than accepting any responsibility for where she now stands, she frames it all as something being unfairly done to her. The reality is that people in her community, parents at school, friends in her circle, may well see her differently, not because of rumours alone, but because of things she herself has said and done in the public eye. When someone repeatedly tells stories, airs grievances, and makes accusations on international television and in major interviews, there will inevitably be consequences. From the interview in South Africa, to the conversation with Oprah Winfrey, to the Netflix series and beyond, she has chosen to present herself in particular ways. Those choices, those words, and those claims have shaped how people now see her. The shift in perception is not a mystery, nor is it simply the fault of the press, yet she does not seem to connect those dots. Instead, she insists that the media should not be reporting on these matters at all, that criticism should not reach her because it affects her life in uncomfortable ways. In essence, she does not appear to dislike the mistakes she has made, she dislikes the consequences of them. And her answer, again and again, is not to face that reality, but to retreat into the refrain, I am a real lady. As if the fact of being real alone should shield her from the weight of her own actions.
I choose to go and do school pickup and drop off, but I do that under a landscape that is created that forgets that I'm a real person.
She now stands in a landscape marked by unpopularity and disapproval, a place shaped not by some unseen hand, but by her own words and choices. And it is true, real people make mistakes. No one should be forever trapped in the shadow of a single misstep, defined eternally by one poor decision. Most of us believe in the possibility of growth, of change, of moving forward. But what sets this case apart is the absence of a simple human acknowledgement. Meghan and Harry have never offered an apology. Time and again, we see public figures stumble sometimes in serious ways, such as a drunk driving charge, sometimes in smaller, more foolish moments, like an ill-judged remark on social media. The pattern is well known. They step forward, they apologise, they take a break from the spotlight, and in due course, people forgive, or at the very least, move on. An apology, sincerely given, has a remarkable power. It shows that a person understands what they did, why it was wrong, and how it affected others. It makes them relatable. It reminds the public that behind the image is a fallible human being trying to do better. This simple act can soften even the sharpest criticism and begin to rebuild trust. And that is what has been missing here. In the world of public life, you cannot skip this step. You cannot bypass the apology. Without it, no amount of carefully crafted narratives or claims of being a real person will change the fact that what people are waiting to hear is one short word: sorry. For years now, Meghan and Harry have tried to vault over the single most essential step in repairing a damaged reputation: the apology. They have attempted to move forward, to reframe, to rebrand, but without ever stopping to accept responsibility for what has been said and done. And for anyone new to the long tangled story of the Sussexes, it is worth setting aside speculation and conspiracy and focusing only on the hard facts. Meghan was compelled to apologise to a judge after it emerged that she had not told the truth about feeding information to Omid Scobie. During the Oprah Winfrey interview, Meghan and Harry were caught in no fewer than 19 falsehoods, clear factual inaccuracies, misrepresentations, or outright lies, and at least 21 more distortions by omission or manipulation. When their Netflix series arrived, instead of correcting the record, they doubled down, repeating the same misstatements and adding fresh ones. Then came the memoir Spare, and still more interviews, each carrying its own set of questionable claims. Behind all of this were not abstract institutions, but real people. Reporters and journalists, whose job it was to cover Meghan and Harry, suddenly found themselves in the couple's direct line of fire. Members of the royal family, King Charles, Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, were depicted in ways that were deeply damaging. Long-serving staff, such as Angela Kelly and others who had dedicated their lives to supporting the institution, were dragged into the storm as well. These were not faceless figures. They were individuals with families, reputations and careers, all of whom bore the brunt of accusations and distortions. What of their lives? What of the cost to them? That is the question that lingers, unanswered, while Meghan and Harry continue on, still unwilling to speak the one word that would at least begin to reckon with the damage, sorry, and then one must ask, what about those people? Their families, their friends, their colleagues, the entire world read headlines built by Harry and Meghan, headlines woven with untruths. They are human too, Meghan. They have feelings, real lives, children who ask questions, loved ones who worry, and reputations that took years to build. Yet they were dragged into the spotlight, burdened with accusations that were never theirs to bear, not through rumour, not through whispers, but from the very words spoken by Harry and Meghan on the world stage. While Meghan repeats again and again that she is a real person, she seems to have forgotten that these people are real as well, painfully, undeniably real.
My kids will see those magazines, and we all know mom's gossip.
Did she forget that she attacked real people, some of them nothing more than employees of the royal family, carrying out their duties quietly in the background? And this does not even take into account the countless other incidents that cannot be fully proven, the moments that seem inconsistent, contradictory, or simply questionable. What we are speaking of here are only the instances where there is undisputed evidence. Moments where Harry and Meghan misled, moments where their words caused real harm to real people. And still, there was no apology, no correction. The narrative they presented on the Oprah Winfrey stage was never set right. Years later, Harry offered a half-hearted retraction in an interview with Tom Bradby, but it was hardly a true correction, not the full acknowledgement of error that was required. Meghan is not innocent, and she is certainly not naive. She and Harry will not escape the cloud of public disapproval until they do what countless others in the public eye have done before them: own their mistakes, admit their wrongs, and apologise with sincerity. Until then, the shadow lingers, and no amount of reinvention will make it disappear.